Ian McKinney here, massive zombie fan. Obviously, three zombie novels in print, what would you expect? Like most zombie fans, I loved 28 Days Later. I enjoyed 28 Weeks Later. I absolutely detested 28 Years Later, but that's another story. However, 28 Years Later, Bone Temple. This film is phenomenal. One of the best zombie films ever made, if not one of the best films ever made. And yet, there's something in it that I think almost every analysis of the film has missed. The Jimmies. The terrifying killers who worship Jimmy Savile. Most people see them as a grotesque cult using Savile's image for shock value. But I think there's something much darker going on. I think Jimmy Savile himself was responsible for creating them. Hear me out. To understand the theory, we need to look carefully at the timeline. 28 years later clearly takes place in a fort reality. There's a clue to this in the film itself. At one point, the protagonists pass a tree in the Sycamore Gap. In our time, that famous tree along Hadrian's Wall has been vandalised and cut down. But in the 28 years later timeline, it's still standing. That tells us something important. The world diverged from our own reality around 28 years ago, when the rage virus outbreak occurred. Which means something else. In this timeline, Jimmy Savile was never exposed. He never became the disgraced monster the world eventually discovered. Instead, he would still have been, as what the public believed him to be at the time, a beloved charity fundraiser, a marathon runner, a famous television personality, a man people trusted. Now let's think about the rage virus's beginning. The outbreak started somewhere in southern England. The infection spreads fast, unbelievably fast. But it's not instantaneous. There's always a delay. The cities fall first. Dense populations collapse almost immediately. But as you move further away from the epicentre and further away from large urban populations, you gain time. We actually see this in the principle of the films. Some places manage to fortify themselves and isolate before the infection reaches them. The island community in 20 years later is a perfect example. So if you go even further north, to somewhere even more remote, somewhere sparsely populated, somewhere difficult to reach, like the Highlands of Scotland, then the spread of the infection slows dramatically, which is interesting, because Jimmy Savile famously owned a house in Glencoe in the Highlands. And 20 years later, we see something chilling. A young boy escapes from a church massacre. His entire family's been killed by the infected. He survives. Alone. Traumatised. Abandoned in a collapsing world. The boy grows up to become the figure we know as Jimmy, the leader and the symbol of the Jimmies in the Bone Temple. But there's a gap in the story, a big one. What happens to him after he escapes the church? The film implies time passes between the outbreak and the formation of the Jimmies, maybe not years, but certainly months. During those months, survivors would naturally gather into defensive communities, barricaded villages, fortified farms, isolated enclaves trying desperately to survive. And in times of chaos, people cling to familiar faces, trusted figures, authority, celebrities, people they believe represent stability. People like Jimmy Savile. Imagine the scenario: a refugee community somewhere in the north, scared, desperate, trying to rebuild some form of order. And among them is a famous man, a celebrity, a charity hero, a man who's raised millions, a man who ran marathons, a man who appears endlessly generous. Jimmy Savile. In our world, we know the truth about him. But in this timeline, they don't. To them, he's someone trustworthy, someone safe, someone respectable, someone who can be relied upon, which means he's given something extremely dangerous: access. And then one day, a traumatized child arrives, a young boy, alone, blonde hair, blue eyes, vulnerable, looking for guidance, looking for protection, looking for someone to trust. And Jimmy Savile notices him. Savile was a master manipulator, a man who built his life around exploiting vulnerable people. Children, parents, the weak, the isolated. The boy fits his pattern perfectly. He takes him under his wing. The community probably even encourages it. After all, Savile is a safe pair of hands. The famous charity man, the trusted adult. But what the boy experiences under Savile's influence is something far darker. Months of grooming, psychological manipulation, control, abuse. And the boy's already traumatized mind begins to break. At some point, the community falls. Maybe the infected breach the perimeter. Maybe the survivors turn on each other. Maybe the settlement simply collapses under pressure. We don't know. But chaos returns, and the boy survives again. Except now, he's not the child who escaped the church. He's been psychologically reshaped, corrupted, twisted by months of abuse and manipulation. Maybe Savile dies in the chaos. Maybe he escapes. Maybe he's killed. It almost doesn't matter because the damage has already been done. The boy grows up. He carries Savile's influence with him. Not just the trauma, but the ideology, the warped identity, the name, Jimmy. He builds something around it, a cult, a tribe, a group of worshippers in the image of Savile. Not as a celebrity, but as a perverted, godlike figure, a predator, the Jimmies. A society built around violence, domination, and ritualized abuse, not just inspired by Jimmy Savile, but created by him. If this theory is true, then the Jimmies aren't just some random cult. They're the long shadow of a predator who was never exposed. A world where Jimmy Savile's crimes were never revealed, where his reputation stayed intact, where his access to vulnerable people continued, and where one broken child became the seed of something monstrous. And that might be the darkest detail hidden inside 20 years later, the Bone Temple. Because the true horror is never the rage zombies. It's the monsters that we become.